and I am a little apprehensive about doing this video. At least I was. And I think it's kind of like a sign because I have this rule that whenever it takes a long time for me to do something, I'm avoiding something. Obviously, that's the definition of procrastination. And in the case of this video, it's actually tied to something else. And I just got back from a trip. I was on the East Coast for 10 days, and it was an interesting trip for me because I think that I have this way of kind of like rolling out a game plan, and I get excited about something and I rally behind it and I develop like strategy, and I know exactly how I want things to play out, how this thing is going to connect to this thing that's going to lead to this thing. And what I've come to realize is that sometimes when you do that, you set yourself up for failure because you're basically dependent on the success of that plan. And when things don't work out the way you want to, it kind of can potentially leave you, or me in this instance, with the sense of like, what happened? Where do I go from here? I built a framework around something and none of it has come together. And it's funny because typically by now I probably would have done 4 or 5 blog posts like highlighting the trip and everything that's happened, but instead I've had a completely opposite experience, and it has been almost like a silencing experience, and I am trying to figure out what to do with that and what that means, and I think I'm getting close, which is really refreshing. So I've been back for right at a week now, and the way I would explain it is that I went there with anticipation and expectation of God. Like, okay, I want to go out there, I want to know, like, out of this trip, I'm believing that like my next step will be defined. I'm sorry, they're like cutting down the tree across. That the next step will be defined, that it'll all come together. And I think that even having that mentality is kind of like an example of how we don't actually depend on God when it comes to the steps that we need to take, or what it is that we're believing for in terms of identifying our calling. And for me, it just has been such a sobering experience because I got in the car Sunday to go back home, and I, for the first time, kind of felt like, man, like, what am I doing? And I've thought that before, obviously, like a million times, but it was the first time, like, fundamentally, like, clean the slate, start from the beginning, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Am I missing something? Like, what is it that I'm called to do? And it's really incredible because it was kind of like, it was crushing, but it was also, in retrospect, awesome at the same time, because as a result, I did 3 things. I started praying like crazy. Like, I've talked to God more probably in this week than I have in a while, and I'm pretty regular about like, oh, the Lord is my friend, I'll talk to him, I'll, you know, reach out to him, but it's a different type of conversation. The second thing is that I put my pride aside and I reached out to friends, and the people who I know really love me and who would really be there for me and hear me out. I just kind of told them what I was going through and what I was feeling and the frustrations associated with that. And it's interesting because there was the expression, misery loves company, but I think there's also another side of that, and it's that sometimes we will walk around carrying a burden or a frustration or a disappointment or a sense of less than, or that we're not doing something right, or that things aren't coming together and that it's our fault, and it can get to the point where it's so self-centered, and I don't mean that in a bad way, just literally self-centered, that you miss out on the opportunity to connect with other people who are maybe going through the exact same thing that you're going through, or who knows someone who's going through what you're going through, or even better yet, somebody who has been through what you've been through, and they can give their words of wisdom on how they made it through that time, how they pressed through, and how they were able to kind of like bounce back and bring it all together. So I started doing Periscope. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a new app. It's linked to Twitter and it's live broadcasting. And it's interesting because I love everything from like blogging to vlogging, like doing a video blog. In general, like I just like creating content. And what has happened kind of with Periscope is that I realized that I was backing off of like doing actual coffee break chats where I sit down, have this conversation, and then post it so it's like a lasting piece of material. Whereas with Periscope, even though it's great and I love it, it only lasts for 24 hours and then it's gone unless you have space on your phone to download it, and I never have enough space. But I say all that to say that one of the conversations that I had yesterday was so sobering because my friend did me the favor of reminding me of like the gifts that she sees in me. And that's another reason why I want to encourage you guys, like talk to the people around you who genuinely care about you and who build you up and encourage you and empower you and who see the gifts in you that sometimes you forget about yourself. And that conversation and her reminding me of like the light that she sees in me and the giftings that she sees that like God has blessed me with, it kind of like renewed my sense of calling. Now, another thing that came out of it though, and you know, I want to be careful about saying this because there isn't a guarantee that just because somebody sees a gift or a talent in you that that's actually what God's calling you to do, but it is food for thought. But another thing that came out of that conversation, and this is kind of like the third step that I want to get to, is, you know, I've always heard this whole concept about surrendering and about being willing to take a leap of faith, and that you know that like, or someone will say, my turning point for me personally was when I let go and I let God, or when I surrendered to Him just to do what He wanted to do. And I've always kind of like paused when I heard people say that because it was such a foreign concept to me. I mean, in my mind, I've already done that. And the fact that I'm hearing it though, and I can't actually like identify with it, suggested to me that maybe I think that I've done it, but I haven't. And if I haven't, I want it. And the way I've described it is that I feel like you're on this side of like a cliff, and then there's a valley, and you want to get to the other side where there's like the promise and all those things like God's calling you to. And I just feel like I'm stuck right here looking at the valley trying to figure out how to get over there. And I think that that is like such a important part to recognize about how some people are wired, myself especially. I am a control person, that's why I like to plan. And I like to plan in kind of like a free range way. I'm not like a super like bit by bit, day by day, like I can do it, but I'm not wired for it, and it like I almost never follow through. But I'm very macro, so it's like I like to know long term, like what's the game plan, what can I expect, what are the scenarios, all that. And not that you can actually forecast to know exactly what's going to come of everything, but there is a certain comfort in feeling like you have control over where all this planning could potentially get you. And what I've come to realize is that this New York trip, for instance, is a perfect example of the relationship that God wants to have with us. So because I had a plan, and because I was very confident about these big monumental moves that were going to happen to me coming out of this trip, I didn't need God for anything, like outside of traveling mercies. Like I didn't go to Him like about meetings that I had. I didn't go to Him about like the expectations that I had. Like in my mind, it was, I have the favor of God over my life, move forward in that space. And what I'm coming to realize is that when we think that we can plan so far ahead, it almost pulls, at least for me personally, it pulls me kind of off the path of needing to walk in step with Him. And there's a quote that I love that I heard years ago, and basically it says that God only shows us the step ahead of us, like He's only going to light that step directly ahead of us when we're going up a flight of stairs. Because if we saw how maybe steep the stairs were, or how dark the stairs were or how rickety the stairs were, whatever that thing might be that would kind of like prevent us from like going for it and doing it, like maybe it would overwhelm us. So it's the whole idea that sometimes taking that leap of faith isn't even like a huge leap, actually. Sometimes it's just being willing to let God order every second and minute and hour of your day and being present with Him in those moments, so that the question really is, Lord, what are you calling me to do? What is it that you want me to do with this time? What is it that you want me to do with this day? Bring in the right people into my life. Show me what it is that's, your will for my life. And I think the tricky thing about that is trying to understand, and this is honestly just where I am now, trying to understand how you live that lifestyle without falling into a space where you're kind of just like waiting around in hopes of hearing from God. And I think that I don't want to call it the answer, but I think my resolution that I'm going to be doing at least is I have a general idea of the things that I think work well for me and the things that have been well received. And I will continue to operate and move towards seeing those things, come to fruition and really like be a reflection of God and what He wants to do with me. But yesterday, one of my devotionals really kind of changed my mentality. And I think that it's simply because my focus, I guess, has been kind of self-centered, and not intentionally so, but maybe it's just that simple. Like, I feel like your why is something that should always drive your decision making, the world that you're building around you. Like, it should always kind of come back to that because it's the focus, right? And in theory, like, God has us here to empower each other, to love one another, to encourage each other, to be a support to one another. And I would dare to say that anytime our motives detract from celebrating Him or from being that light in the world, like, I think He kind of hits a reset button. And I think for me personally, like, I kind of had to have a reality check. Like, even though I didn't realize that that's what maybe I was doing or the space I was moving in, I think that, like, sometimes it just comes down to it being a breakthrough and it being something where it's like, I want to take you to the next level, but you have to get this first. So I don't know what that next level is going to be. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know what to expect, but I do know that I am fully convinced that at some point, the things that I've been believing for and the impact that I want to have in the world in terms of like building the kingdom and just being like a source of inspiration for people, that it will probably blow my mind. And I think that sometimes that really is what faith comes down to. I think it's just trusting, which is like a little stressful, I'll be honest, but trusting that God really is working towards the good for your story, for your life, for your cause, for whatever it is that you're believing for, and just trusting Him to like put me in the right path in even the like smallest of ways or the most simple of steps. And I think that tapping into that is a very vulnerable thing. And I think that it's also a very freeing thing. So anyway, that's all I have really, but I just wanted to share that because I feel like there seems to be, I can't speak for everyone, but I have had conversations kind of similar to this lately where people are just trying to figure out like what is going to be the breakthrough, like what is going to be the thing that just kind of like takes you to like that next place. And I don't know, I would dare to say that like that shouldn't even be the focus. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's probably easier said than done, but for right now, I'm just focusing on the relationship part. Like, I'm just focusing on wanting to be where I'm being called to. And I think that you know, you have to be ready for what that actually might be. So I think that that's all kind of like one big burrito of like hypothetical situations. And it'll just be interesting to see how it plays out. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I know I was kind of rambling, but you know, these are my thoughts, and that's what the coffee break chats are. So anyway, just to recap, I definitely say, first things first, like, be willing to let God lead. Second thing, be willing to ask Him directly for what it is that you need, whether that's clarity, whether that's identification of purpose, whether that's restored relationships. I mean, there are a million things, but ask God to, in the smallest of things, synchronize everything that you're believing for so that it'll come together for your good, to reveal your why, to reveal the calling, to call you where you need to go. Secondly, third, I would say connect with people. So reach out to people who you know love you, who can encourage you and support you, and who can just be there and stand in the gap for you when you're maybe losing it or you're just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Those people, in my experience, have always gotten me so far in difficult times. And last but not least, like, keep going. I think that I was almost like teetering on kind of like I wanting to throw my hands up and just kind of be like, I don't know, like, what we're doing here, and just kind of like being over it. And I think that that's exactly what the enemy wants. I think he wants us to feel defeated and to miss out on the blessing. And the cool thing is we never know how close we are. We also don't know how far we are, but we never know how close we are to having the breakthrough that God is like, just like, oh man, you're so close. So hang in there. Stick it out. You're not alone. And look forward to the next coffee break chat. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.